Joining us now, MSNBC senior national and political correspondent Jacob Soboroff, who's in Chicago for us. Former DHS Assistant Secretary for Counterterrorism and Threat Prevention, Samantha Vinograd. And back with us, former Ohio Governor John Kasich. Sam, I do want to begin with you on this because the president is making broad claims about what's happening in Portland, and Portlanders are saying that's not happening. Officials there are saying that's not happening. The federal judge who reviewed the National Guard deployment said it doesn't appear to be happening. The facts are not lining up with the president's rhetoric. Do you suspect that they're trying to wait for a situation, agitate enough in order to have an image that they can use to justify invoking the Insurrection Act?
Well, Katie, I think we have to reframe the narrative here. The president and the administration appear to be setting up a set of false choices. Either you believe that Portland is completely safe, or there is a security situation that warrants invoking the Insurrection Act, which really hasn't been used since 1992 during the Rodney King riots, and prior to that, 1965 in Alabama. Two things may be true. It may be true that the majority of Portland is safe and calm, and it may also be true that the ICE facility in Portland may require an additional degree of protection. But that does not mean that the National Guard is necessarily warranted. When I was at DHS, there were various security risks to federal personnel, including ICE agents in Portland. And there are so many other options than calling in the National Guard, whether it's other federal law enforcement or having a conversation with the mayor and the governor about what additional law enforcement may be best equipped to meet the situation on the ground.
Governor, I mean, you've had experience with that as a governor. You've also now written a letter. You're part of an open letter that says you're worried about what the president is trying to do. Walk me through the other options if you feel like your federal facility is not being protected.
Well, first of all, I like what our guest just said about the fact that there's a middle ground. I mean, we had a convention here in Cleveland. I asked for all the help I could possibly get. I went up, I met with clergy, I met with business leaders. We had a great convention. There was not even a window broken. And then I take a look at Chicago, and I had a conversation with a very active person, an activist in Chicago yesterday. And I said, and he was arguing that things are much better. And I said, have you ever gathered anybody to go down and see the president to tell him exactly what's going on and what you might need? He's a very smart guy. You would know who he is. And he said to me, you know, John, that's a really good idea. We hadn't really thought about that. The mayor and the governor are not going to go. They're launching invectives. But the issue is whether it's at the ICE facility in Portland, and I've seen a lot. I mean, I've got people that I've talked to who live in Portland who have mixed feelings about this. Look, at the end, Katie, you're trying to protect people. Ask to see the president, tell him what's working, tell him what's not, and ask him for the kind of help that you might need in order to make sure that that the violence doesn't spread, or we can contain the violence, or we can deal with it. This whole business of we're going to be in my corner, you're going to be in your corner, that's what we are on everything in this country. If the president won't see you, or if the president just rejects you out, then you're in a position to really have a lot to say. But go and try to have the meeting and make sure that what you are asking for is a solution to the problem, and explain to the president. And you know, Katie, there have been a number of people who have gone to see him. Look at Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan. She went in to see him. She's not had any problem in Michigan. By the way, when she went to see him, she got attacked by her own party, which was just a big mistake. The fact is, it's communication.
How do you communicate when the president is saying you should be arrested, though? I mean, the president's saying that the governor of Illinois should be arrested.
I don't think he should be saying that. But you know what? He says a lot of things. All I'm trying to suggest is the governor is not going to look at what the governor called him. He was talking about him, you know, in his capacity, his mind. I mean, these are invectives. These don't work. They wouldn't work with me. If somebody wanted to see me, we had violence in
but you
Ohio.
Wouldn't call for someone to be arrested, well, you know, with all due respect.
No,
that you wouldn't be in this situation.
I wouldn't ask for that. But you know what? It all starts with the way in which you lead to begin with. So, look, that's what he's saying. So now if you're there, you say, OK, I wouldn't even send a mayor or the governor. I would send a different group of people who live in Chicago, business leaders, civic-minded leaders, clergy. Just go down and see them and see if you can get this thing straightened out. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, his name calling goes on all the time. Let's look, there are people at risk. That's all I'm trying to suggest here, Katie.
So he's having the president is having a roundtable at the White House right now on Antifa. He's mentioned Portland. He says Portland Antifa thugs have repeatedly attacked our officers and seized federal property and attempted to violently stop the execution of federal law. He's also said, Jacob, I'll bring you in on this, governors and mayors of Portland and Chicago should be, quote, very careful. Have you gotten any indication, I know you just spoke with the governor of Illinois, that there is a desire or an attempt to have a dialogue with the president, as Governor Kasich suggests?
I think that the idea that the federal government and local law enforcement don't talk to each other all the time it needs to be more understood. They are talking, state, local, federal officials, but what Governor Pritzker is saying is that principal to principal, they're not talking. He's not hearing from the President of the United States nor the Vice President of the United States. They're not communicating what's happening with these National Guard troops. I think that on a logistical level, on a law enforcement operational basis, there is some level of communication taking place in all of these cities because that's standard operating procedure. I can't tell you that to be sure, but I can tell you that when we were in Los Angeles, certainly they were hearing from the federal government and communicating with them. Jim McDonald, the chief of the Los Angeles Police Department, and Robert Luna, the Los Angeles County Sheriff, were hearing from their counterparts in the federal government. The thing that strikes me is, again, it's this cognitive dissonance between what's really happening on the ground and the way that the president is talking about what is happening here. I love that you played that report from Portland. I would encourage everybody to actually go on the MSNBC Instagram and watch what our colleagues from our social team have put up from people on the streets of Chicago. It's nothing like the rhetoric that you are hearing out of Washington, D.C. And I don't know that any level of pleading, I'm not disagreeing with Governor Kasich, but any level of pleading from Governor Pritzker to the president is going to change the way they talk about what's happening on the streets here. My opinion is it's largely our job to come out and show the realities on the ground so that people all across the country can understand that no matter what is being said from the White House, you can't argue with what our own eyeballs are seeing and what we're able to share with the people that are watching us right at this moment.
And there are also people who are experiencing violence at the hands, say they're experiencing violence at the hands of ICE officers and other federal officials, federal officers. I mean, in talking about, religious leaders, there's a pastor who's suing the federal government for being hit with, I think, rubber bullets or something like that while they were protesting and praying outside of an ICE facility in Chicago or outside of Chicago. So, I mean, it has gotten, there's not a lot of talking because there's a lot of, there's a lot of confrontation. There are clashes.
Katie, the raid on that apartment building in Chicago, where they brought in the helicopters and they were rappelling down and they were breaking in and putting kids in these zip ties, completely and totally outrageous. It makes a situation really, really bad. It is outrageous. OK, that's something that should be explained to people in the administration. I never give up communicating with people who have authority and power to a point where I can call on them to help me. But that raid in Chicago was just I'm just still, my blood is boiling over that raid. And nobody supports that. Nobody.
Jacob, go ahead.
This is a show of force that they are intending to put forward. And I don't know if any level of communication with the Trump administration is going to stop them from these shows of force. Greg Bovino, the chief of the patrol for the United States Border Patrol, said as much when they marched through MacArthur Park and didn't arrest a single person. When they went to, why would they have, let me ask you a question, or our audience a question, why would they be out there with documentary video crews taking high-definition video of that raid on the apartment building Governor Kasich is talking about, on the bakery that I was at yesterday, picking up the 53-year-old mother going to buy meat for a stew, if they didn't know exactly what they were doing and doing exactly what they wanted to do? They are documenting all of these things and putting them out for the world to see, because that is the point. And like I said, I hope that some level of dialogue could cool the waters here, but it doesn't seem like the federal government is acting in that way, at least not from my perspective as a reporter on the ground.
Sam, on that note,
in
go
my
ahead.
Experience, In my experience, ICE, Customs and Border Protection, and other individuals engaged in immigration enforcement actions have very specific protocols based on the potential threat that they are facing from an immigration enforcement action. If you're going after a criminal, a narcotics trafficker, a potential terrorist, you engage in certain tactics. And if you are arresting an individual who unlawfully crossed but doesn't pose a security threat, there are different tactics used. It is clear here that fear is viewed as a tactic, likely a deterrent tactic, to try to discourage other individuals from trying to cross the border unlawfully. We saw that same tactic deployed in the first Trump administration. That is not something that the Biden administration adopted. And there were other, huge differences with immigration policy under the Biden administration. But using that kind of fear and broadcasting those kind of tactics over social media, over broadcast media, and otherwise is clearly a key part of this administration's policy when it comes to immigration enforcement.
All right, Sam Vinograd, Governor Kasich, Jacob Soboroff, thank you.
You know what's wild? The President of the United States threatening to use the Insurrection Act like it's a TV prop, waving it around to scare people into silence. And when the courts, governors, even on-the-ground officers push back, he calls it strength. It's not strength, it's fear wearing a uniform. Here's what's actually happening. We're watching a White House try to turn Chicago and Portland into a campaign set. Not because cities asked for help, not because the facts say there's a war zone, but because chaos on camera is useful politics. Inside the noise, the reality is messier. Most neighborhoods are calm. Some federal sites need routine protection. That gap between truth on the ground and panic from the podium, that's where the abuse lives. Career security officials know the difference. If there's a credible threat, terror, trafficking, violent crime, there are measured tactics, clear protocols, coordination with local authorities. That's how public safety works in a democracy. What we've seen instead are theatrical raids, film crews in tow, helicopters, rappelling, parents in zip ties, pastors hit with projectiles while praying. That's not targeted law enforcement. That's fear as a tactic. That's power trying to script a reality show. And here's the tell. When you're serious about security, you talk. You work with the mayor, the governor, the police chief. You set shared objectives and accountability. But the president isn't doing principles to principles calls. He's doing threats from a podium and name-calling on social media. Because cooperation doesn't give him the shots he wants. Confrontation does. Now, the title says the military's turning on him. I'll say this, the uniform is not a prop, and people who've worn it, along with veteran DHS hands, cops, sheriffs, know the danger of politicized force. They know the Insurrection Act is a last resort, used sparingly in our history, not a shortcut around judges, governors, and voters. When seasoned professionals say, slow down, follow the process, use the right tool for the job, that's not disloyalty. That's loyalty to the Constitution, not to a man. The moral cost is real. Every staged show of force erodes trust. Every door kicked for a headline teaches kids that the state is arbitrary. Every lie about American carnage spreads like oil on water, slick, smothering, hard to clean up. This isn't just policy, it's a culture of impunity. It says, if we can make you afraid, we don't need to prove anything. And that is how democracies get hollowed out, one frightened neighborhood, one rubber bullet, one edited clip at a time. So here's where we land. If you truly care about safety, you demand truth, coordination, and accountability. No more posturing. If you respect the military and law enforcement, you don't use them as extras in a political stunt. And if you love this country, you refuse to let fear do the thinking for you. Our job right now is simple. Keep our eyes open, keep our voices clear, and keep our democracy from becoming someone else's set.